is a very unusual opportunity for us to have a forum such as this with people who are very involved and important to the newsstand. And I think what we need to do is make sure that everybody in the audience that has a question gets a chance to answer it. So I'm going to kind of reverse course here, if it's okay with you guys, and instead of me opening up and asking you questions, we're going to open it up to the audience. If anybody has questions for any of these gentlemen, let's bring them up. Albie?
This is specifically addressed to Andy, and I'm curious about your retail partnerships and how you get your magazine in retail stores, and how you form the partnership, and also how you logistically handle distribution to these non-traditional points.
Yeah, I think on the larger scale of specialty retailers, we work with our partners who do specialty distribution, whether it's Ingram's News Group, and then you see the names like Gander Mountain and REI, and those are places where we may have them handle the logistics, but we'll go in and partner up with Kelty backpacks, and there's some kind of point of sale promotion that is, Kelty is promoting through their product merchandising, which is, put together with us and with them, and then executed at checkout or at the retail. But on a smaller scale with really specialized retailers, we've done things with small chains of tack stores, for example, and in the equine world, where we have created a custom SIP for the 25th anniversary of one of these retail chains. And there's a story about a long legacy of this chain, which has kind of built the Western wear apparel business. And so our content was talking about, the history of the West and the history of Western wear, and it was all built around a celebration they had in store. So that would be on the highest degree of difficulty. I think on the lower degree of difficulty is working through our partners who handle the specialty chains, and then within those chains working with some of the product folks who are thematically merchandising, selling things that work with us.
Yes, ma'am.
If you'll hold, let me pass the mic so everybody can hear you.
Gentlemen, and maybe Shawn, you'll start, because I'm thinking maybe we have the best fit in the independent bookstores is kind of where we would probably see ourselves. If you were launching a lifestyle magazine with in a market that is generally dominated by pass along magazines, is that what the industry term is? The giveaway, the non-subscription, they're in a rack, right? If you were launching a lifestyle magazine for readers 45 to 75 in a sort of mid-range demographic, would you give it away because everybody around you is giving it away, or would you look for real estate in the racks, in the subscription?
That's quite a question.
Single issue.
I don't give anything away personally, but because I think you've already set the standard. However, I do understand there's marketing, and that's why giveaways occur. I think, as you look at, I think David even put up there, was it Texas Monthly or whatever. The fact of the matter is, where that is selling is not just in the supermarkets in Texas, but where it was found or started, where it was first curated. And yes, I would say whether it's a specialty store that, some buyer in the backpacking or hiking area has said, this is my favorite, and I'm going to make sure it gets presented to the consumer, or an independent bookstore that has curated that content and cross-merchandised it. I didn't mention when I was talking about that Amazon store, they had one of the best cross-merchandise magazines of any bookstore I've actually seen. I actually hate to say that. I don't like that setup, but it was very well cross-merchandised and curated for the consumer. Those magazines were in the Amazon store. So You know, I'm not a big fan of giveaways. I just am not. I think you've already set the price and when you give it away. Now, if someone's paying for you to give it away and they're paying you more than the value of it giving it away, that's a whole different story. Those economics probably don't quite exist today like they used to. So, you know, I think, you know, there is hand selling. That's what bookstores do. That's what specialty stores do, is curate the product for the consumer.
Dave?
I think that we've done a lot of work with free publications. You see them not just in bookstores, but everywhere. I think you got to define what you're going to be. I've seen people try to promote on entry-level editions, but I think you got to decide what you're going to be. Are you going to be a free publication and thus be along with all the free publications? Or are you going to be a for-pay publication? And you got to fight the slings and arrows of the competition that exists at the newsstand, both at the mainline and checkouts in doing so. And then it goes back to what we all talked about, and that is better content will set you apart from the rest of them. But I don't see I see a very distinct difference between the free pubs, which are valuable and people use them, versus the for-pay titles. And I think the transition, if you tried to start in one area and tried to go to the other, would be very difficult.
I don't think you can do that. I think you can front end whether, you know, where your neighborhood is.
Now, there's one gentleman sitting up here that has tried this, so I might let him talk.
John?
Direct this Hubert and David. Hubert said that compared to the display in Germany, our magazines are displayed in the wrong places within a store, and that a key element would be getting the magazine display right at the entry to the store, or the first area that the consumer comes by. A few years ago at one of our retail conferences, I think Rich Jacobson mentioned that after the Great Recession and people spending less in terms of disposable money that they brought to, say, a supermarket, that most of it was spent within the first 100 feet of the store. So I'm following on this. Is there any expectation or any chance that magazines in major mass market retail stores in the U.S. are going to reconfigure where and how magazines are displayed within the store?
You know, I was wondering when I talked about that, should I even raise that question? Because it's a dangerous question. I understand your concern. Retailers are looking at other products to replace magazines at checkout. But nonetheless, you know, what I wonder is, we are kind of stuck in this situation. We have bad mainlines, we have inefficient checkouts. Still, the checkouts are, of course, fantastic real estate. But is it possible to find perhaps a small retailer who would test a different way of selling? Is it actually in the interest of the retailer to have the current layout of the store? I don't know enough about retail to answer that question, but I wonder, is it really good? I mean, if you go into a retail store, so you have these 20 or 30 checkouts, and 20 out of 30 are always empty. So even for the retailer, this cannot make total sense.
I talked a little bit about the problem with the category. The retailers today are bombarded with so many new items, and they're searching desperately to find space for these new items. I wouldn't want to see a diminished magazine category either in perception or in sales, in real sales, because we're fighting right now to keep mainlines in the stores. We're also working very diligently on finding new places for those mainlines within the stores. Back to Hubert's response about next to the brooms. I think that historically might have been the case. I think they're getting better and better at it. The problem is they're getting smaller and smaller when this happens. So I would be very careful in today's market to not maintain that front end space where you see every consumer that walks through the stores. And I'll give you a simple example. Way back in the day, we started a chain called it was Chief Auto Parts. And Chief Auto Parts had tried 4 iterations of trying to sell magazines in line. The problem was people didn't travel up and down those lanes and looking for a magazine. We moved, for one trying as a test, we moved a little mini mainline to the checkout. So basically put a checkout in. where you could see every consumer that came through, and instantly it fixed the problem. And we had sales that were sustainable, that the chain liked it and paid attention to it. So I think, once again, you're getting, not the way consumers shop today, they don't necessarily do the aisle thing. They work their way around, but everybody goes through those check lanes. So if you want visibility, you've got to be at those front ends. And so from my point of view, absolutely, address the issue of maybe being over-racked at the front end. Don't address the idea that we want to come up with some kind of a consolidated rack within the first 100 feet of the store, by example. Because guess what? There is major consumer products goods companies looking for that first 100 feet as well. So we're competing with a very tough group.
I think just to add to that too is, one of the things that Hubert brought up in Germany is that 65% of all magazines are sold at Newsstand. And the reason why is because they don't give away magazines through subscriptions. So if wholesalers were even selling 40% of all the magazines at Newsstand, it changes a whole lot of stuff. First of all, it makes us more relevant to the retailer, certainly makes us more relevant at the checkout, certainly allows us to keep our space, right? And also, it positively affects publishers because then wholesalers don't have to ask for subsidies, higher margins, or other things. So really, our problem is capacity. Our problem is shifting more product sales from subscriptions to Newsstand, in my opinion. Until we get there, I think it's important, and David brought it up, we're losing a lot of space at the checkout. And the way that we need to save that space is we can't continue to put 20 copies in a store to sell 2. We have to better utilize those checkout pockets. We have to rotate product through it, but at the same time, keep those titles in there that have the frequency to build the brands, as Hubert says. So there's a lot we need to do here to improve the newsstand, but one of the most important things I think we need to do is, again, collectively approach publishers to see how we can work together to have them focus more on the newsstand so we can shift the sales back, as Eric was saying, to where it's not only 10% of magazine circulation going through the newsstand, but maybe 20 or 30%. And I think that benefits all of us.
If I could jump on that for a second, because I think Hubert's point of the simplistic stupidity of this costs 5 times more at retail than it costs as a subscription, has been the case as long as you've had a vibrant ad model. And if this were an advertising conference or a subscription conference, and if you're a publisher looking at the whole model right now, and the ones have historically said, build the rate base and we'll sell the advertising. So if you showed some of those same charts on print ad pages, they have declined as dramatically or more than newsstand sales. So when you're a publisher looking at the entire business model saying, I can't really ask my newsstand buyers for a raise because they're already paying a super premium. I certainly can't ask my subscribers for a raise because I've trained them to get a incredible discount. So where are you going to go to balance the ship? So because of that, and if you're not deep inside the business and you read an announcement of some magazine with 1 million circulation goes out of business overnight, why does that happen? Because they built the entire thing on an ad base.
Exactly right.
So almost just by the pressure of the ad market, you're seeing a number of, and I won't name names, but there are some publishers who've built their business on selling $5 subscriptions or $5 for 2 years of very high quality magazines. They're readdressing their models. We're asking our readers we're raising our subscription prices because the advertising's not there. So I think that will, just the economic pressures, if not even intentionally by the industry, are going to drive pricing up on the subscription side and more of a balance between the value of a newsstand sale and a subscriber sale.
Right.
So do you believe that the traditional publishing model in the United States to sell as many ads as possible and to sell subsidized subscriptions, do you think that is coming to an end? I mean, one thing that I find very interesting right now is that Rodale changed the business model for prevention. Is that the beginning of a different way of calculating? I mean, when we launch a title, the very first thing I try to figure out is what can we sell? Single copies. And then everything else follows suit. I think typically an American publisher would do it exactly the other way around. I start with the advertising potential, and then I can figure out how many $1 million I can lose on the subscription side. And Newsstand is probably unimportant, it's an afterthought. So do you think that could be the beginning of a rethinking of this model?
I think it's well underway, and Prevention is a great example. More magazine out of business. You know, there's a lot of brands that were built on building up a rate base for an ad business that, you know, are great brands, great products. A number of the Martha Stewart Living brands didn't work. The advertising didn't get there. So I think that it's by force, not by design.
I mean, unfortunately, though, more is out of business. So they didn't change their business model. Or if you look at RU, I mean, with the single copy sales that RU had, I would never have closed the title. I think it is possible to make money with a magazine just with single copies and with profitable subscriptions. And of course, the advertising business wasn't there quite as strongly. But again, closure instead of change.
I think that a lot of it has to do with, you know, the rate-based game has been, you know, troubled for some time. You know, I was asked the question recently why we're not AAM audited. One is none of the magazine circulations are, you know, of any size, you know, that's interesting if you're a large ad agency, because they're trained to buy mass reach and, you know, negotiate on price. If you meet the rate, you win the business, and otherwise you don't. But what's interesting about audits in general, and this is not to say you should or should not, but I think there's a fundamental problem that our industry has right now. The AAM statement, to me, you don't really see advertisers win ad business because they're audited. You see their you know, it's a report card, right? It incentivizes the wrong thing. Publishers in general are trained that I don't miss rate base. And I've never understood that. We've decreased the rate base on several of our magazines because the natural level of circulation just wasn't there. And, you know, I had a conversation with a publisher, this is probably 6 years ago. We had a magazine that grew, you know, really rapidly. It was plateauing, and we realized that in order just even to maintain the circulation size, it was going to cost, I think, $2 million more in circulation expense the following year to maintain the rate base. And I said, I don't think there's enough advertising business out there to even come close to offsetting that. And that's not how we run our business, so we have to decrease the rate base. Ironically, our advertising clients that were existing clients appreciated it, because they realized, well, you know, I'm paying a little bit a little bit less now, assuming CPMs stay the same. But they started to realize that it was like, okay, you could have jammed a bunch of junk circulation into this, kept the rate base where it was, but what kind of quality is that, right? And I think that's the fundamental issue that our industry has, that we're facing, is that so many magazines have been telling the story about mass reach, you know, and we see it. I mean, we call on ad agencies. I run our advertising business as one of many things I do, and I can tell you that we lose a lot of business because 25-year-old, you know, media buyer is trained to only think that if you're not a million paid circ, it's not interesting, we can't buy it. But that story is starting to change. I think that we are starting to see advertisers say, I recognize that my response I'm getting off of you know, these magazines is not what they used to be. And I think that it goes back to what we're talking about, right? I mean, you know, if you can buy a year's, you know, magazine for $5, I saw one publisher, I'll go unnamed, that I saw 4 years for $15. And that's offensive. That doesn't even make sense, right? You have really smart, talented editors. In our business, we've got test kitchen chefs, we've got great photographers, we build this whole content thing up. And then we've got, you know, people in our industry that devalue the relationship to the consumer. I don't get that. But back to the newsstand, I think that's part of the problem. So I think that publishers, you know, are in a lot of cases incentivized to do the wrong thing because, you know, they don't know what doing the right thing would look like. And it's really got the business in an awkward position where the single copy business, how does it grow? I know that it could be more balanced. I don't know if it'll grow, but I think that's sort of a challenge to our industry.
And as I said, and it affects everybody, right? It affects him, right, because he's got the fixed costs and he doesn't have the volume. It affects you guys because he's charging you more to get to market. So it's not good. So Ingrid, would you mind bringing up that slide for me? So I don't know if anybody's ever done a scientific study of the effect of subscription cost to newsstand sales. What Magnet's done, and we're going to come out with a newsletter article to get into the details of this, but what we've done is we took about 900 and some odd magazines and looked at their newsstand sales from 2014 to 2015 for the effect on sales, okay? And then what we did is we overlaid on that the subscription prices as they relate to newsstand cover prices. And what you'll see there, and some of it's surprising to me, quite frankly, but if a publisher keeps the subscription price within 40 to 50% of the newsstand cover price, the effect on sale is about 4 to 6%, okay? But once a publisher goes above the 50% level, it changes significantly, okay? So a publisher who discounts their subrates by 50 to 60%, in general, experienced about a 10.5% decline in newsstand sales. Those publishers that provided a discount of 70% on a newsstand price, 16, 17%. And if you look at the titles, okay, and because we track all of this, but if you look at the titles between 25 and 100, and you've seen the decline in their newsstand sales, those are the guys that are doing that, okay? So there is a direct correlation in the effect on newsstand driven by the discounted prices on subscriptions. So, and again, that affects everybody sitting up here and everybody in the room.
Bill, aren't those same guys the guys who own the mainline pockets, the checkout?
The checkout pocket. A lot of them are. And quite frankly, what's happening, Bo, is their sales aren't there anymore, okay? And so a retailer is making a decision to reduce the number of pockets, gets with the wholesaler, and the wholesaler says, no, we want to hold on to the space, so we want to run higher priced products through the pockets. And I think that's where the business is going. What David talked about earlier is not having a monthly magazine necessarily up there that sells 2 copies in a store, having it up there for 30 days. There's no return on investment for the retailer. It's taking higher priced product and running it through those pockets in order to maximize the ROI on the space.
For the vitality of the industry, and this would take cooperation, which we won't get, but for the vitality of the industry, we need to circulate other titles in those pockets to get a vibrancy for the whole industry.
Exactly.
That's not likely to happen, but that's what needs to happen.
Well, I think it's more likely to happen now because TNG, as the largest wholesaler, is doing or is focused on taking control of the checkouts, okay, so that they can run product through there. Previously, to Hubert's point, you would pay a retailer an IPO, initial placement offer. And if you went in and offered a retailer $20 per pocket, you got the best pocket in the store. Your product may not sell, but the retailer's real happy because he put a bunch of money in his pocket with little investment. So I think that's starting to change where the wholesalers are taking more control over the checkouts so that they can run a better product through there so we can control the space.
Well, real quick.
This is a great discussion, but please hold your question until you get the mic because we need to get everything taped. So you are on direct.
Good question. Can I answer this just one real quick second? I mean, the fact of the matter is it's this false economy. That's not like I'm echoing here. This 70% subscription rate driving down the newsstand sale is now creating a reaction at retail by the publishers that have these pockets you're referring to, that are now no longer willing to participate in those pockets. And it sends a message to the retailer now that I can't fund it. So for the room, if I have 50 shares at each check lane and I can't find anybody to buy the 10 pockets, and I'm looking at it as a retailer, I'm saying that I no longer need those 10 pockets. And it's happening, it's being picked here and picked there. It's creating the continuity that we have when we walk into the stores and these major retailers around the United States is being lost on the fact that people will not participate. And by the way, it's getting us down to the store level as opposed to the chain level. But at the chain level, it's very difficult for us. So we're going to see a reduction. And to Gil's point, we have to take action, and we are taking action the best that we can. But I mentioned the idea of a digital change it out overnight kind of a situation at the front ends. I think we have to do that. I mentioned the idea of putting seasonal product there when it's seasonal. If you ever walk into your local Trader Joe's or your whatever you shop at and see what happens at the front end, it is always changing, and it's progressing along with the consumer demand. So we've got to get there. If we try to just stick the same old cookie cutter in there and people start not participating, we're going to be dead at those front ends.
Agreed.
So it seems a common thread from all the speakers is the importance of putting value back on the content of these products, like any other product, establishing that. And as a marketer on the printing side, I'm wondering whether or not the industry has thought about a differentiated product. So what you sell at the newsstand has maybe some other valuable attributes that you could charge more for versus the subscription base. As we always thinking about what we can bring to these magazines that add value, that differentiated from digital. But I didn't hear a discussion of possible versioning of magazines from two different audiences willing to pay two different price points. I'm just curious.
I think Sid touched on it last night. I mean, he has improved the pagination, improved the quality of the paper on his newsstand copies, but maybe not on the sub copies. I think Andy's touched on it earlier too. He's kind of done the same thing, improve the pagination, improve the quality of the paper, improve the content, but he may do it on the sub side too because he's going to raise the price there to get the perceived value.
But we do have two magazines where we have added 16 pages on the newsstand copies that are not in the subscriber copies. In our Vegetarian Times magazine, we're just adding a mini insert cookbook, and on our Cabin Living magazine, we've created a separate lifestyle section that we're promoting on the cover. As a subscriber, you can download that digitally, but the total book size of the newsstand copy is 16 pages larger. And we've seen that actually give a sales lift, so it's something we're looking at across a lot of other magazines. Well,
I'll add to that. One of the things we're helping publishers do, and we've done this with Hoffman, is letting that content live on beyond the newsstand with print on demand. So we've taken content, slapped, repurposed content together, and let it start selling online. And doesn't hurt the newsstand sales. Honestly, just puts more in the back pocket of the publisher they can then use to do something else. I've always said this, there's this content that's out there in the newsstand. It's fascinating. Again, if you rewind, if you put a 12-year-old in the room and you just say you got all this content, it just disappears. The 31st day, it's gone. It literally just like, it's done. And it's, again, people can learn from that content on day 131, 231, 831 actually. We carry 14 million book titles. A lot of that is old content, right? And this magazine content, that's how I think I would encourage, online shopping is huge, all right? And, you can support the publisher and the content through online. We've raised the price on this stuff. I mean, actually, it's compiling old content, raising the price, and it's incremental because you're not printing it till it's actually sold, and it's all incremental at that point because you were literally throwing it all in the trash can. So that's another way to just add an incremental sale that helps the publisher put it back in the newsstand. Rich?
Yes, kind of a point and then a question. The point would be on the checkout, because for so many years, as David said, the publishers have put up most, if not all, the monies to have that space up there. So as publishers step away from that area, what's left is the amount of space for publications that's still, as far as I know, still being primarily paid for by the publishers. is there an opportunity for the distributors who see, kind of more quickly those trends that might say, gee, maybe I could invest in 10, 20, 30% of that front end and take advantage of some of the quick trends. You mentioned the sporting events. There's probably outdoor events around the country that could be promoted against, that kind of thing. Is that an opportunity? Second point, and then I'll stop, is, when I think about Shawn and Ingram, some of the direct accounts, so for instance, like an REI, you have like the big variety of merchandising. You have somewhere it's really left up to the retailer to do it all. And to the other extreme is where News Group really mainly has merchandisers that go into stores, I guess once a week about, or something like that. I'm not confident. In Germany, it's every day. Is there any opportunity to increase the amount of merchandising in store on a weekly basis? Thank you.
I'll answer 1.5 parts of that, and I'll let Shawn answer the other. We are looking at buying the entire front ends and with some of these places because it's getting so critical that we do so. It's not accurate that the magazines have paid for those front ends. And Candy's always paid for their section based on a linear inch and all that great stuff. Salty snacks, the same thing. Peggables, same thing. The big thing that's really attacked those front ends over the last several years has really been, your carbonated beverages and water. And they are willing to pay serious money because a single one of those units will turn 2 to 3 times a day in a busy store. And that's the entire unit, the cooler box, completely from a fully stocked rack all the way out 3 times. So I mean, it's big volume for these retailers. It's a different price point on the types of waters and beverages that they put there. So the fact of the matter is, when I talked about protecting that space, I really mean protecting that space. If we have to buy some of it, a subset of some of it, all of it, we should do that without question as an industry, and for our own livelihood, do it. Because once it's gone, it's gone. It was really, we got very lucky on that Loblaws example I gave and the Sobeys example where they put in, but if you notice, they just put in a little 4-foot thing, right? It's not, they didn't reinvent the front ends back to where they were. They just put a few periodicals there because they saw that magazines really did make a difference.
And the customers ask Loblaw goods back to.
Absolutely. Hey, listen, when these disruptions happen, if you want to understand something very fascinating, when everybody crashed and the source crashed in this deal, we had retailers without products, and most of them took a very laid-back approach to see how it was going to transition. When the consumers got involved in this thing, the phones rang off the hook with us. The consumers were demanding, where is my publication? I'd like to know where magazines are. I want my magazine. I'm going to be here next week to get it. I buy it when I'm come here. It was the first time that we got real confirmation that the consumer would not stand for periodicals and not being there. Great reassurance for us.
Hey, David, jumping on that point, if checkout sales increase tomorrow, it'd make this business so much better, not only at the front end, but even on the main line. You just mentioned a good point about how consumers jumped on the bandwagon to get magazines. What can we do to engage retailers more? It brings up a great point. You go into a store today and lane 4, 7, and 8 is open all day. By the end of the day, it's a mess, that lane, and the lanes next to it are fully merchandised. How can we engage a retailer to say, when that cashier goes to turn on the key to open up their cash drawer, before they do that, can't they spend 15 minutes cleaning up candy, salty snacks, and magazines? Back in the late 1990s, we did a test as an industry, and when retailers did that, sales increased double-digit. So a cashier who's making minimum wage can have a huge impact on the sales in that one business in the store. That one checkout lane is a business unit. If they can manage it and be engaged a little bit more, because you can't get there every day.
No,
You're not delivering product every day. So
Not yet.
But anyway, but that would be is there a way to engage retailers? If so, how can we test it? If not, what's the obstacle?
Well, I'll answer that, and I think it ties back to Rich's question a little bit. The fact of the matter is we can get them incentivized to do that, and I think they're incentivized to do it just for customer satisfaction's sake. They just need to recognize it. Dave Forsman and I had the good fortune of meeting with HEB a couple days this past week. And with this new reinvention of their front ends, they have made the commitment to repurpose those front ends with product every day. So they're going to be out there in front, moving stuff from one lane to the next lane. Fantastic. Our friends at Publix, those of you that are familiar with Publix in the Southeast, they do it as part of their normal everyday business practice. They're an ESOP, so every employee is an owner, and so they take ownership of that product and they move it around. Back to what you said, Rich. First off, I do work with Shawn right now on merchandising, so wherever he'll hire me, wherever I've done a good job, I'm happy to do that. We do have 10,000 employees out there moving around the marketplace doing this stuff, so we need to get involved in that. With the expansion of all these other things we're doing, so just by a quick example, we've signed a long-term agreement with Nestle Water. So we deliver, this is a Nestle Water ironically, all of the Nestle product to all the Kroger stores in the United States along with their other stuff. Now, the reason I say that is it keeps us in the store 3 more days. So it gives us that opportunity now for the first time, Ron, to go over and just say, hey, we're going to go and tidy this thing up. And we can keep an eye on what kind of money we're spending with each of our merchandisers in the store. We also have the management that's growing as a result of this. So you're 100% right. Part of the issue is pockets, by the way, are getting thinner at the front end, which means there are more sellouts, more opportunities to replenish. So it's a challenge.
I'll add to that. So it's retail ownership, it's retail buy-in. Everything's a math equation. It just is. We have one customer we merchandise for, and we don't. David does. And the reason is we've incented that retailer to take ownership of that category, whether it's the mainline or checkout. You can go to Barnes & Noble, there's checkouts, they're putting those magazines in those pockets. REI's is at the checkout, or very close to it. Again, it's all part of how do you ensure that they take the ownership. David said he can get there 3 days. That's still not 7, all right? It's not going to be 7. You saw the economics. It will not be 7. There are some retail outlets that demand 7, and I'm pretty sure where they fall on David's profitability line is at the very bottom. So you can't do it. You've got to incent the retailer. That's their, they take the ownership. Now, again, the way to incent them is to create the right content, right? They're going to curate and they're going to make sure it looks right. They are going to do that. Again, if you get up to Toronto and can see a Chapters or an Indigo store, it's a fascinating merchandise store. Again, they have taken the consumer and said, I don't want you to go anywhere. You're going to buy a Mother's Day gift, you're going to buy them the cookbook, the apron, the magazine, the whisk, whatever you're going to buy it, all right, before you walk out. I don't want you going to Williams-Sonoma, all right? And I've curated this store for you. So, and if they wouldn't position that stuff well and make it look well, it doesn't matter how much they curate it, they wouldn't buy it either, all right? So it's retailer involvement, and it's a math equation, and you got to incent the retailer. We do, even.
Yeah, and to that point, if you look at the Shawn slide about Barnes & Noble or bookstore sales being down a lot less than other classes of trade, it is because they have ownership of the product. And they have great sections, right? And they're continuing to merchandise it, so there's a lesson learned. Unfortunately, we still have a lot of meat on the bone that we're not going to be able to eat here today because we're running into the other people's time. But I do want to make one other point. We need to get together as an industry. We need to have these discussions in a forum where we have publishers, national distributors, wholesalers, direct wholesalers, so that we can talk about improving the newsstand, because it is the only way that we're going to be able to continue to build brands. I don't think you do that over the internet or through websites or through mobile devices, at least that's my opinion. One last point is we have to act collaboratively. David says he's got 76 marketing people out there. If you throw in marketing people the national distributors and the publishers have, there may be 125 marketing people. But guess what? Most of them aren't giving the same message to the retailer. So we're confusing the retailer and not helping our situation. So we need to bring it together, work collaboratively, so we can sell the retailer on one message.
Can I give one little tidbit at the end of this, and I'm sure Shawn will go with me on this as well. But if you spend time like I do, excuse me, with the retailers in the United States, and we try to go as high level as we possibly can in these organizations, and pretty much we're tipping over to ownership in these things. The publishing industry is still highly respected by the retailers in the United States. If we provide good content, good promotion, good visibility, these guys will stay in this business and they'll work with us. And I'll leave it with one thing is, books represent about 18% of the sales in the supermarket class of trade around the United States. Retailers spend about 80% of their time on 17% of the business promoting movie tie-ins and things like that, because the book business is constantly is a natural self-promotion vehicle. If the magazines were doing something similar to CPGs, right? You got new diapers, they have a new stripe in them that tells you, which is something I just learned a little while ago, that the baby's wet or he's, got number 2. The fact of the matter is, what I'm saying is CPG companies are building brand extensions, they're building new product design and things in their products every single day. It's still Pampers diaper, but now it's got this and it's new and improved. Maybe the same price, new and improved. Call it out, call it out, call it out. Make it responsible, make it visible, make it desirable, make it interesting to the consumer, and you're going to sell more of it. So I'm telling you, we have a great chance right now. These guys, we just came out of a big national conference, met with all of the heads of all of these major retailers. They love the category. They're interested in the category. The last thing that they want to grow the category.
This is really, really a great discussion. In all the conferences and all the sessions I have attended, I've never heard or seen such a really, really good discussion. But I hate to be the bearer of bad news, because Josh and his team also have another lively discussion coming right after this. So I know some of you need a biological break or a mobile break. So why don't we take 15 minutes